We're now going to be joined by Tiago. Tiago is a co-founder and CTO of Polkastarter, and he's going to be talking to us about DeFi. So he's going to give us an overview of DeFi and how you can start working on DeFi. Hi, Tiago. Yeah, I think you're muted. Yeah. Okay, you're good.
Thanks for the invitation. How are you guys?
Great. It's a pleasure to have you here today with us. So we're not going to waste any more time. People are already fed up of listening to me. The floor is yours. Go ahead, Tiago.
Cool. So I'm going to stop my video and I'm going to share my screen. I think it's a lot easier. So I'll share screen and I'll open up. Can you guys hear me? I guess so, right?
Yeah.
Good. So I'm going to talk about introduction to DeFi for developers. My name is Tiago Martins, but I go by myself by Tiago Makes in the internet for quite a while. It's my first Twitter handle, so I just kept with it. And today the talk is going to be around, I guess, 35, 40 minutes. I'm trying to make it as interesting as possible. I don't want to give you a hard time. And most importantly, I wanted to make it as useful as possible. So what am I going to talk about today? So first of all, very, very briefly, who am I and why the hell you should be listening to me in some cases. A general intro to DeFi and a high-level DeFi dApp stack tutorial. And finally, because I believe that the best way to learn is actually putting yourself in a real example. And I'm going to show you how, in a very high level, how we built Polkastarter to what it is today, which is a DeFi dApp. So who the hell am I? Very short. This is basically my Twitter handle for a long time. I love this guy. It's called Paul from the movie Paul. He's an alien. And so basically, I'm a computer scientist by trade. I graduated in computer science back in 2012, I think. And then I realized that one of the biggest problems with education is I didn't actually learn how to code in university, as I think most people don't really know how to code right after getting out of university. So I was really frustrated and I thought, what is the best approach to actually learn how to code? And I thought it's by real examples. So me and my co-founders created one of the first project-based education system platform called CodePlace back in 2013. It was actually called Stuck.io. It was extremely successful. We had 100,000 students from 100 plus countries, and we were basically teaching Ruby on Rails. And I had a lot of fun doing it. Didn't make a lot of money, but that doesn't matter because I learned a lot and had a lot of fun. Then CodePlace was acquired by Academia de Código, and I became a computer science professor there. But I was in the crypto bandwagon since I think 2014. So I started getting myself into Bitcoin, understanding what it was. I read the original white paper, sorry, not white paper, but the Satoshi paper. And yeah, so I started going through the rabbit hole. And back then I was trying to understand how the market dynamics worked. So I did a really very, very basic analytics platform, on-chain analytics platform. And I showed it to my friends in Lisbon while I was doing being a professor, and they really liked. So I joined a team at CoinVision, which was one of the first magazines. I would call it a magazine that basically we reviewed ICOs and projects. So back then in 2017, there was a big ICO hype, and the problem with that, a lot of projects didn't really have enough technical due diligence. So basically what we did was we actually went down the rabbit hole for each of the project and actually reviewed them, met the team, met the stack, and actually gave advice, not financial advice, just advice of whether the project was suited or not to actually invest in. After that, the market crashed. So I had to get another job in aerospace. So that's a different story. But then finally, one of my ex-co-founders at CoinVision invited me to become a co-founder at Polkastarter, which I'm going to show you what it is now. So for those of you don't know what Polkastart is a launchpad, and a launchpad, just think like it's like Seeders. Sorry for the pun, Carlos, or Kickstarter, but for blockchain projects. So basically, we help out blockchain projects to raise capital directly from the community, right? And we started it in 2020. I'll give it a tutorial of how Polkastart works later on, but essentially we just help blockchain projects raise funds from the community. And in the last year since its inception, so we founded it back in 2020, so horrible year, in September, and we helped, like I think 2 weeks ago, the 100th funded projects. Around 30,000 people participated in these IDOs, and we helped projects raise over $40 million. So that was a hell of a year for us, and we grew the team from 4, which was the basic 3, which was the original team, and now we're around, with product team, marketing team, and everyone, I think we're about 35 right now, and we're all bootstrapped, which I'm really, really proud to say. Yeah, so that's Polkastart, that's myself, but I think what you guys are here for is learning a bit more about DeFi, which is one of my biggest passions. DeFi, just to start off, it stands for as simple as decentralized finance, okay? And most of the people, when they hear DeFi or finance, they think of people like this, like Gordon Gekko from the movie Wall Street, 1990, I think. But it actually is, like they think like just like a bunch of greedy developers trying to make as much money as possible, but it's like the farthest from the truth. What DeFi really is actually this. It's people trying to build a better financial system that will benefit the majority of society. So the approximate definition of DeFi, and I tried to find what is the best realistic definition, is actually putting it as a goal. So the goal of DeFi development is to create an open and financial market that is trustless and permissionless. So what does this mean exactly? So I created this slide that basically shows what life is before DeFi and after DeFi. And I had a lot of these problems before DeFi, and that's why I have such a passion for the work that's been going on from the community. So in the traditional financial system, just a couple of examples. So whenever you want to, for example, get a loan for your house, let's say you want $100,000 for you to buy a house, the only people that decide that if you should get that loan is your bank. And it goes through a long paper trail that it's based on assumptions and not actual reality. So do you have a job? How much do you make? But in the end, it's 1 or 2 people that actually decides if they're in a good mood, if you actually get credit towards your house. So that's one of the main problems. The other biggest problem, actually, I think it's the biggest problem, is because governments do not have they have full control of the currency. They decide how much you can actually buy with your money. So what does this mean? So $1,000 today is not the same as $1,000 10 years ago, because governments print money, they issue coins in terms of in exchange for debt. So basically it's an inflationary asset. The euros or dollars you have is actually it's worth less and less every year. And finally, and I just saw this tweet today that Canada actually froze the assets of the protesters. So governance, whenever they want, they just can call the banks and say, hey, I want you to freeze the assets of this person, that person, and that person, because we think they're misbehaving. So it's a good system. I think capitalism completely works, but I think there's a lot of middlemen and a lot of people in power that get control of the masses. And that's what DeFi is about. DeFi is actually giving people the community's power back. So in DeFi, with the DeFi protocols and dApps that we're creating, your credit score, for example, is based on your actual collateral. So let's say I want to take a loan of $100,000. So there's actually smart contracts that if I deposit my actual current Bitcoin or Ethereum, they immediately can tell what is the allowed credits. So basically, if I want $100,000 in as a loan, I have to deposit around $200,000 in Bitcoin. What this means is it's actually a good system because it's not credit based, it's equity based. So the actual smart contract controls the actual credits. Another one that's really, really important is no one can freeze your assets, because if the DeFi dApps are truly non-custodial, only you have access to your accounts. There are some DeFi apps that are custodial, but most of them are non-custodial, which I'll show you in a minute. And last but not least, I think the main utility right now with DeFi is lending protocols, which I have a weird fetish around weird lending protocols for some reason. And basically it's a way of borrowing and lending money. So typically whenever you ask credit for a bank, they lend you the money, but they charge a fee per year. So let's say like it's 1 or 2% per year. In DeFi, the same happens, but it basically matches people that want to lend their money and people borrowing their money. And because there's no middleman, there's a higher interest on the fees earned for whoever lends the money, and you can get cheaper interest as well when you're borrowing the money. So, and this is all happens through smart contracts. So there's no fear of loss to misappropriation, unless of course there's hacks. That's one of the issues, but that's another story. So, but basically this is life before DeFi and life after DeFi. So, but the DeFi ecosystem is huge. It doesn't end here. It covers like wealth and asset management, prediction markets. We have some friends that works there, talented people also from Portugal, poker markets, lending, which I just talked about. Oops. Oh, Pedro is here. How do I close this? Infrastructure, marketplaces and liquidity, which is a big portion of DeFi. Stable coins, which is basically an alternate to government issue currency, such as BUSD, TUSD, and GUSD, and so many others. And they have multiple ways of actually how they work. Payments, and finally compliance and identity, which is like KYC, decentralized authentication, and so on. So there's a lot going on. And for you guys, I really want to build the next version of DeFi. There's a lot you can do. Oops, I think I have a comment here. How do I see this? Sorry. Oh, okay. Hi, good morning, Pedro. Yeah, so I don't know how long you guys been in crypto, but back in 2017, when the bubble burst very publicly, there was the traditional way of measuring success, which is coin market cap. You guys know coinmarketcap.com. So it's basically just the important metrics are circulating market cap and total daily volume. But that doesn't mean the actual project is useful. It just means what is the speculative value of that project. So it's basically like a popularity context or a hype game. The difference with DeFi, and something I really like, there's a new metric that really values the utility of the DeFi protocol, which is called TLV. And it's a very important metric for you guys to understand. TLV simply translates to total locked value. And it's basically the overall value of crypto assets deposited in a decentralized finance protocol. So whilst the old way of measuring the success of a blockchain project was market cap, with DeFi, you can actually track the actual utility value using TLV, which is extremely important and basically measures the utility and the trustworthiness that project has. And as an example, there's a lot of lists of total lock value, but these are the top 10 right now. So Maker has 16 billion total lock value. Curve Finance, which is a yield lending platform, it's 11 billion. Aave, another yield lending. Compile, another yield lending. Yearn Finance. So most of them are actually yield lending, but a lot of them are AMMs, so automated market makers. But yeah, this way we can actually see the actual utility that the project has been given. So you actually can create a model, a fair market modeling, value investing based on the actual utility of the project. So that's basically TVL in a nutshell. So in summary, very simple introduction to DeFi. DeFi stands for decentralized finance. The goal of DeFi is to create an open financial market that is trustless and permissionless. DeFi is improving many financial sectors such as asset management, lending, borrowing, KYC, compliance, and whatnot. And you typically measure a DeFi product success by total value locked. So that's in a nutshell. I'll share a lot of resource in the end, and I'll put it into Twitter so you can learn more about what DeFi is. But now let's get into actually coding. I'm not going to share actually any coding, any scripts or coding, but I'm just going to give you a high level overview for you to understand of what it takes to actually build a DeFi dApp, right? So for those of you who don't know, like the area we're talking about is called Web3. And what is the difference between Web2 and Web3? There's a lot of definitions, but I think this is the most appropriate one. So basically is what in Web2, there were a lot of companies that used various APIs to actually provide services for users. The problem is that those end users don't own any of the data. So basically they're black boxes, right? They work great experiences, but behind the app, you don't really know what's going on. So for example, Spotify, you have no idea if the fees are being distributed to the musicians. Upwork, you have to trust that Upwork is actually managing the payments for the freelancers correctly. GoDaddy, when you try to buy a domain, you don't really know if that price is actually fair because it's a premium domain, and many, many others. Google, there's no introduction necessary to actually the problems that they've been having lately. So basically Web3 is by using a new stack, you're basically decentralizing a lot of the data and a lot of the information flow that's taken care of. Falcon is a great example. So instead of you hosting files in Dropbox or Amazon AWS, you're storing Filecoin in the blockchain. Instead of basically buying a GoDaddy domain and registering on ICANN, you just register on ENS on the blockchain, and so on and so forth. So basically, it's just Web3 is permissionless Web2. So basically, it adds the ownership layer. So users can actually own and be able to see what goes on behind the scenes. I think that's the best definition, and this is highly opinionated. This is my opinion only. And funny enough, I love the statistic. There's not a lot of Web3 developers. Web3 developers constitute like mostly Solidity developers, Solana, and all blockchain layer 1 solutions in terms of coding. And also you can actually constitute the ones like that are front-end developers that interact directly with Web3 front-end clients. But in total, there's an estimated 20,000 Web3 developers. And considering there's around 30 million developers, we're a very, very small bunch. So, and the funny thing is, it's 1.81 trillion actually not controlled, but created from 20,000 developers. So there's a huge, what I think, there's a lot of ways you can look at this number, but the way I think it is, which is in a sunny day scenario, is there's high efficiency here. So it doesn't take a lot of developers to actually build a product that can scale tremendously because the infrastructure can handle and it's ready for scale. That's the whole point. So what is a current dApp Web3 stack? And I'm just going to go from the left to the right, and then I'm going to show you a real example of actually how it fits. So starting with a blockchain, first you need to pick a blockchain. So L1 blockchains such as Ethereum or Solana is basically where the whole code is going to be deployed at, and transactions will be transacted in that blockchain. Layer 2 and sidechains, I'm not going to go into it, but basically layer 2 and sidechains solve problems of layer 1 in terms of scalability and gas costs. So sometimes it gets really, really expensive to run transactions on layer 1 solutions. So layer 2s help with that. So basically they batch transactions and other kinds of ways to actually make the TX costs a lot a lot better. So how do you develop smart contracts or programs for Solana in a day-to-day basis? So basically, you need a development environment, such as like Ruby on Rails or other full stack Web2 development environments. You have development environments just for Web3. One of the most used and my personal favorite, which has been getting a lot of popularity, is Hardhat. So basically, with Hardhat or Truffle, you create your personal blockchain in your computer, which you can actually try, compile Solidity programs, and run test-driven development methods to make sure the whole thing works from beginning to end. So it's a complete suite that lets you create your own personal environment in your computer as it was a blockchain. You can actually set the blockchain, speed up the blockchain to actually test timestamps. There's a lot of fun you can do with it. So before anything else, I think you should try Hardhat or Truffle. There's a lot of tutorials that can just set you up in your local blockchain, and you can tell your friends that you basically set up that in 5 minutes. After you have that and you deployed your first contract to layer 1 solutions, either on testnet or mainnet, you can start getting creative. So for example, file storage, there's a lot of talk in this hackathon. So you have IPFS and Filecoin that you can store your data. Instead of using your own legacy AWS services, you can basically store data on those services, services there. Completely permissionless and transparent. Off-chain data protocols, I'm not going to go too much around, but basically they're a way of actually caching some of the data off-chain, so for immediate access. Indexing, querying the graph is really, really nice. So what is the graph? So imagine I deploy a staking contract. Instead of me pinging that contract directly, a lot of times, which can get not expensive but slow. Basically, what the graph does, it creates an index of that smart contract and translate into a GraphQL API to be consumed for you or by anyone. So in terms of DeFi, this is really important because there's a big class called DeFi aggregators that basically aggregate a lot of DeFi dApps and protocols. And typically they use the graph to actually query their APIs directly through the graph. So without actually having to know the ABI endpoints for each smart contract, it just standardizes in one nice API for you to consume. Finally, you have identity, of course. Most of you know MetaMask, I guess, but Wallet Connect is a great solution that basically connects to other wallets like Trust Wallet and so on. And finally, if you want to actually make a Web3 dApp for MetaMask to actually connect, you tend to need a library. So like Web3.js and Ethers. So basically, it's just an abstraction of a way of connecting your decentralized application to the actual smart contracts and getting a persistent connection to the blockchain. So that's the Web3 stack in overview, but I'll give you a real example in a minute. So, and this is, and I want to bring you to here in terms of DeFi, and this is completely opinionated. This is my opinion. I didn't take this from anywhere, but the way I see it, there are 4 types of dApps in the DeFi ecosystem. And I'm going to go through all of them. So custodial and non-custodial. Probably you heard about these terms in the traditional finance sector, but what this essentially means is in a custodial environment, the actual company owns the wallet. So whenever you deposit funds, they actually have full control. Non-custodial means even though they created a protocol that handles those transactions and funds, you actually own the wallets. And then in hybrid and full dApp, basically the way I see it is, are you still using some Web2 infrastructure to store the data, host a website and whatnot, or you're completely using permissionless systems such as Filecoin and IPFS to actually host that data? So in practical terms, Polkastarter currently is a hybrid. So we do have a lot of smart contracts that handle all the funds. Everything that's transaction related and money related, we use smart contracts. But the actual data, let's say the images, the projects, descriptions, the actual website is hosted on AWS and other things. So we're still a hybrid, but hopefully by version 4 will be a completely full dApp, and that brings us closer to the DAO. So let's just summarize the DeFi Web3 stack. So a dApp is a centralized application. That's basically what it is. It is typically built with a development environment like Hard Hats, compiled and deployed on a blockchain like Ethereum, and allows users to interact it with via a library like Web3.js and MetaMask. A DeFi dApp is typically non-custodial, which means that the users have full control over the wallets. And now comes the fun part. So I think, as I said before, the best way of actually learning about something is to put into a real world context. And I used Polkastarter as a real example of how we actually built our DeFi dApp. So first of all, what is Polkastarter? I already explained it's a launchpad, but what problems are we solving? So basically the problem we're solving is around VC angel fundraising. So normally a company decides that it wants to raise, say, $1 million to build out its vision. I want to build the best app on the planet to do something, right? Normally they spend months looking for VCs that are in that ecosystem and understand what you're building. They trust the founders. After you get the VCs on board, you spend thousands of dollars in expensive lawyers. It can go to 40 to 100K in lawyers if you're raising $1 million. So it's really an expensive process with a lot of due diligence. And in the end, VCs will own and control a big part of the company. This can be good, of course, because they get involved. They have skin in the game, but at the same time, you kind of like lose a lot of share of your company at the get-go in the first days before actually building anything. So what the Polkastarter does is we have a system called IDO, which is called Initial Decentralized Offering, which is basically like angel fundraising. And the process is a bit simpler. So a company applies to raise, let's say, $1 million with Polkastarter. Polkastarter already has a community of investors. So we have around, I think, 700,000 investors as a community, the total community that are subscribed to our fundraise. And we just ask them, so do you like this project? After the community votes, we send up to our council, which is basically comprised of the leading exchanges and a lot of really important people in the DeFi space. And we evaluate if the actual project is good enough, not good enough in terms of how long it's been in terms of app development, but if the team is solid, basically the decentralized due diligence. And then after everything is approved, so the people voted and the council approves that it's an actual real company with actual potential, the project just deploys what we call a fixed swap smart contract in 5 minutes for $500. That's what it takes to actually put up the contract up. Then the community that basically voted automatically basically can enter that IDO. And at the end of the IDO, they receive the governance tokens. And those tokens can be sold to others. But I'm going to break it step by step. So first of all, there's a new project. We open up for applications. Normally, we have around for every other project, we have around, let's say, 200,000 to 1 million applications. So I know that's quite a lot. So you're asking how can you actually fit all those people in Polkastarter? So you don't. One of the reasons, one of the ways that we keep the projects happy and the community happy is if we give a positive ROI to people that invest. So we have to keep the unique participants not that high, but also not that low. So we always aim for 2,000 to 3,000 project participants. And how do you pick that? So we have a system called the on-chain lottery that it basically calculates based on the amount of polls you have. So it's our native Polkastarter governance tokens. The higher probability, the more you have, the higher probability you can get into an IDO. Okay, that's it. After the company deploys the contract with us, the contract is whitelists those lottery winners, and only those lottery winners can actually enter the IDO. So after when the IDO starts, those whitelisted participants can swap their ETH or USDT with governance tokens at a fixed price. And after the IDO ends, participants can claim their tokens immediately. So they don't have to wait. They don't have to trust the project. Everything is handled by the smart contract. So in the beginning, the project stakes the governance tokens directly in the smart contract. And in the end, those contracts get distributed automatically through the smart contract to the participants. So in essentially, we decentralize fundraising at best. So you must be curious, so what is our stack? So our stack is basically composed by 3 layers: smart contracts, middleware, and apps. As I said, we're still a hybrid app. So we still host a lot of things off-chain, but essentially our smart contracts are the fixed swap, which handles the IDO process, the NFT swap, which handles NFT sales, which is an upcoming feature we just finished yesterday, QA. Then you have the SIG whitelisting. Basically, it's just a smart contract that allows whitelisting to be really cheap because on-chain whitelisting can be really, really expensive. We have the smart contract that has our Pulse staking system. And right now, to date, I think we have $60 million staked in Pulse. So that's the amount of people that are willing to stake their Pulse in order to participate in IDOs. Then we have the lottery smart contract, and then we have the counterpart Solana program. So basically, because we all written in Solidity from the start, we had to basically rewrite and recompile in Solana to handle Solana IDOs. Then we have the middleware. One of the big problems in Web3 is actually onboarding and actually, as you know, finding Web3 developers. So we found a really creative way of actually onboarding our developers to Web3. So we created this NPM package called Polkastarter.js. And what it does essentially is it abstracts a lot of smart contract functionality and calls into one API NPM package that the front-end team can just ping as it was just a standard NPM package with functions. So in this Polkastarter.js package, we do the connections to Infura and Alchemy, which is basically on cloud nodes. So basically, instead of us running our own node of or Ethereum or Binance Smart Chain, we pay companies like Infura and Alchemy to host that node for us, and we just call them. Right now, we're compatible with Ethereum, BSC, Avalanche, Shell, Polygon, and Moonbeam. And soon we're going to deploy the Solana using the Solana programs. Also, we use Open Graph and Covalent. So basically, as I said, Open Graph creates a really nice RESTful API endpoint for our staking contract and other endpoints we use. And Covalent we use it for our oracles, for price oracles. So if you want to get the price at any point after the IDO ends of how that project is performant, we ask Covalent, so for this token ticker, what is the price for this right now? And Polkastarter is our internal data warehouse that we just store a lot of stuff, basically. And then in terms of apps, so the first version of Polkastarter was actually written in Rails and vanilla JavaScript. I know we're brave, but always on the bleeding edge. So we had to go really fast. But now we're migrating the Polkastarter UI to React. We're going to keep the Polkastarter backend on Ruby, and we have the Polkastarter Council where the voting happens on a standard Rails app. This is the way our team is structured, and I think this is important for you guys to understand. Like, it doesn't take a lot of people to build DeFi that can have some success, as mentioned. So our team is built like by, I'm the CTO, João is the chief product officer, so he makes most of the product decisions. Then we have Edward as the general project manager that helps fits all the pieces into place. And then we basically divide the team into 5 sections. So we have the backend team, front-end team, on-chain team, DevOps team. We actually need a DevOps team because we have constant DDoS attacks, but that's another conversation. And then finally, you have the analytics team, which is in charge of making our data warehouse consistent and always available, because we have quite a lot of amount of traffic that's always requesting a lot of endpoints. So summary of how Polkastarter is built. PokerStars is a dApp that allows blockchain companies to raise funds directly from the community in a permissionless way. The actual IDO is fully managed by the fixed swap contract, and our stack can be summarized in 3 groups: on-chain, middleware, and apps. And basically that concludes my talk. I said I thought it was 45 minutes long, but I took a little less than that. But I compiled a really nice list if you want to learn more about DeFi, or if you're actually starting Web3 dev. I'll share this with Carlos after, and I'll put it in my Twitter accounts. These are just names that people I follow, and I'm a huge fan. And also some resources like Messari yearly reports and How to DeFi books. There are from CoinGecko are huge assets. And then in Web3 Dev, I included guides of how to get started into DeFi dApp developments, going from like the basics to actually token engineering, which I think is really, really helpful when building a new protocol or a dApp. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiago. That was a great talk, and I think you covered DeFi from one end to the other, while also kind of giving us an overview of the full Web3 stack. So that was great. Thank you very much for that.